I was sitting at my desk, my mind drifting back to Mark and how he'd been pulling away from me lately. It was strange how the little things that used to warm my heart now just left me cold. I remembered the nights we'd stay up late, talking about everything and nothing, feeling so close. But lately, even his silences seemed to have more weight than his words. My fingers danced over the keyboard, but my thoughts were somewhere else entirely. I kept hoping for something, a text, a call, any sign that he still cared. When my phone buzzed, I felt a rush of hope flood my chest. I thought maybe it was him finally saying what I longed to hear, that he missed me, that he saw me. I pictured his face softening, imagined his voice telling me everything was going to be okay. But the second I saw the message, my whole world froze. There it was, so blunt, so final. Pack your things and leave. I'm coming home with my new woman. You're no longer needed. My hand started to shake, the phone almost slipping from my grasp as I read those words over and over. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room, like my lungs forgot how to breathe. My heart slammed against my ribs, the pain so sudden it felt physical. Everything we'd built together felt like it was crumbling around me. But even through the shock, something inside me whispered that this wasn't the end. This was the beginning of something else. I sat there for what felt like hours, my mind stuck on those cold final words. Every memory of Mark, the laughter, the shared dreams, the quiet moments in the dark, felt like it was turning to dust. I felt my chest tighten as I thought about all the ways I'd tried to keep us together, all the nights I'd stayed up worrying about us. My body felt heavy, almost too heavy to move, like I was pinned to the chair by the weight of his betrayal. My heart was racing, but everything else felt like it was moving in slow motion. I couldn't help but remember the first time we met, how his smile lit up the room, and how I thought we'd build a life that would last forever. Now, I could feel that dream slipping through my fingers like sand. My mind kept replaying the words, "You're no longer needed," over and over until it felt like they were carved into my bones. It was like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, staring down into a future I didn't recognize. But even as the shock threatened to swallow me whole, I felt something else stirring inside. A spark of something raw and determined. A part of me that refused to be broken. I wiped away the tears that threatened to spill, my jaw tightening as I took a deep breath. If Mark thought he could just erase me from his life with one text, he didn't know me at all. This was his choice, but what I did next was mine. I stood up slowly, feeling the ground beneath my feet like it was new, like I had to learn how to walk all over again. My hands were shaking, but I forced them to steady as I put the phone down. I took a moment to really look around me. The stack of files on my desk, the sound of coworkers chatting outside my door, the soft hum of the computer. It was all so normal, so everyday, but inside, my whole world had shifted. I felt like I was balancing on a knife's edge, caught between heartbreak and something stronger. I didn't know exactly what that strength looked like yet, but I could feel it gathering in my chest. It was there in the way I stood a little taller, even though my heart was still bleeding. It was there in the way I swallowed back the tears and let my breathing steady, one slow inhale after another. I realized in that moment that this wasn't the end for me. It was the end of what we'd built, but it wasn't the end of me. And that small truth felt like the first crack of light in a dark room. In a single sentence, he ended everything we'd built, but I wouldn't let it end me. I felt a quiet resolve settling in, a promise I was making to myself right then and there. I didn't know what tomorrow would look like, but I knew one thing: I wouldn't let this break me. I wouldn't let him have that power. I stepped out of my office, ready to face the next chapter, whatever it might bring. Emily sat on the edge of her bed, the silence of the room pressing in around her like a fog she couldn't shake. She stared at the phone, her fingers hovering over the screen as she thought about calling Mark, as if there was still something left to say. but deep down, she knew there wasn't. He'd made his choice as clear as day, and she wasn't about to beg for scraps of love from a man who'd thrown her away. The thought made her shoulders tense, her whole body tight with a mix of hurt and determination. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but all she could do was sit there and breathe. The tears that had threatened to fall earlier had dried up now, leaving her eyes hot and sore. She felt like a ghost in her own life, moving through the motions with a hollow kind of focus. She started packing her things with trembling hands, each shirt folded carefully, each drawer emptied out as if she was erasing herself from this space. It was surreal, the way her entire life was being reduced to a suitcase and a few boxes. She paused for a moment, holding a faded photo of them laughing together, the memory sharp and jagged against her heart. But even as the ache threatened to break her open, she found a strange calm in the silence. It was like her mind was drawing a line, a quiet, determined line that said, "Enough." If he thought she'd fall apart, he didn't know her at all. She wouldn't give him that satisfaction. She took a deep breath and kept packing, feeling every item slip through her fingers like pieces of a life she was ready to leave behind. I sat on the edge of the bed, the silence in the room pressing in around me like a heavy fog. My phone lay in my lap, and for a moment, I almost dialed his number, my fingers hovering over the screen. But there was nothing left to say. He'd made sure of that. I wasn't about to beg for pieces of a life he'd already chosen to destroy. The thought made my shoulders stiffen, my breath catch in my throat. I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, but all I could do was sit there and let the weight of it settle in my chest. The tears that had threatened to spill earlier had dried up, leaving my eyes sore and burning. I felt like a ghost in my own life, moving through the familiar motions in a daze. I started packing my things with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, folding each shirt like it was the last piece of me I had control over. Every drawer I emptied felt like I was erasing myself from the life we'd shared. I paused for a moment, holding a photo of us laughing, the memory cutting deep like a blade against my heart. Even with the ache threatening to break me open, there was something else underneath it all. A quiet, steady calm that felt almost foreign. It was like a line had been drawn inside me, a soft voice whispering that I was stronger than this. If he thought I'd collapse, he didn't know me at all. I wouldn't let him have that power over me. So I took a deep breath and kept packing, each item a silent promise to myself that I was done begging for someone who never deserved me. As I folded the last of my clothes into the suitcase, I felt a cold determination settle over me. The closet, once filled with our lives intertwined, now looked bare and hollow. Every empty hanger was a reminder of what I'd lost, but also of what I was choosing to leave behind. I moved slowly, methodically, almost like I was performing a ritual to say goodbye to the woman I used to be. The more I packed, the more I realized I was making room for something new, something that wouldn't be defined by his betrayal. I thought back to all the nights I lay awake, hoping he'd reach for me, that he'd see how much I was hurting. I'd given so much of myself to that hope, to the idea that love could fix what was broken. But now, as I taped shut the last box, I felt a finality in the click of the tape. This wasn't a pause, it was an ending, and I was the one turning the page. My hands were still shaking, but there was a steadiness in my heart that hadn't been there before. I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror, the woman staring back looking so different from the one who had started this day. Her eyes were tired, but there was a glint there, a flicker of something fierce and unyielding. I realized then that I wasn't just packing up my things, I was packing up the pieces of a life that no longer fit me. And as I zipped the suitcase closed, I made a silent promise to that woman in the mirror. I would find a way to turn this heartbreak into something that would make me stronger. I took one last look around the room, letting every memory wash over me. The late-night conversations, the whispered promises, the laughter that once felt endless, all of it felt like echoes now. I pressed my hand against the doorway, feeling the cool wood beneath my fingers, grounding myself in the moment. It was strange how a place could hold so much of your past and yet feel like it was never really yours. But I knew, standing there, that I couldn't let this space define me any longer. I picked up my suitcase, the weight of it nothing compared to the heaviness in my chest. I walked through the apartment slowly, almost reverently, as if I was paying my respects to everything I was leaving behind. Every step felt like a choice, a declaration that I wouldn't let this break me. I didn't need him to give me closure, didn't need his words to make sense of what he'd done. I was done searching for answers in a man who'd already turned the page. As I stepped out of the apartment and pulled the door shut behind me, I felt a quiet sense of finality settle in. It wasn't relief, not yet, but it was something close. He might have thought I'd beg, that I'd crumble under the weight of his rejection. But if he thought that, he didn't know me at all. This was my heartbreak, but it was also my chance to start over. And if he thought he could keep me down, he had another thing coming. I sat across from the lawyer, my hands folded tightly in my lap as he laid out the next steps. The office smelled faintly of coffee and leather, the air cool and steady around me. I listened carefully, absorbing every word, feeling the weight of this decision settle deep in my bones. This wasn't about revenge for me. It was about reclaiming something that was mine. Half of everything, and more importantly, my sense of worth. My voice was calm as I asked questions, my heart steady for the first time in days. He walked me through the paperwork, line by line, making sure I understood exactly what I was entitled to. Each document was a small act of defiance, a quiet refusal to let Mark's betrayal leave me empty-handed. As I signed my name, I thought of all the ways I'd once tried to hold our life together, the late nights, the compromises, the quiet hopes. Now every stroke of the pen felt like a promise to myself that I'd never do that for someone who didn't value me again. I was done living in his shadow. I walked out of the office feeling lighter, the first real breath I'd taken in days. The city outside was bustling, the sun warm on my face, and I felt like I was seeing it all through new eyes. I wasn't just a woman who'd been left behind. I was a woman taking back her power, one careful step at a time. Mark thought he could erase me from his life like I was nothing. But what he didn't see was that in my calm, I'd found a strength he'd never imagined. When I left the lawyer's office, I went straight to the bank, my head held high and my shoulders squared. The bank teller smiled politely as I requested to withdraw my share from our joint account, but inside, I felt a quiet thrill at the finality of it. Every dollar was a symbol of what I'd contributed, what I deserved. There was no anger in my voice, no trembling in my hands, just a calm resolve that made me feel stronger than I'd felt in weeks. I watched as the numbers shifted on the screen, like I was finally rewriting the story he'd tried to end. Next, I closed the credit cards we'd shared, each snip of the scissors another line in the quiet revenge I was crafting. It wasn't about money, really. It was about taking back the pieces of me he'd tried to claim as his own. With every step, I felt the knot in my chest loosen, the weight of his betrayal lifting just a little bit more. It was almost dizzying, this feeling of control after so many days of chaos. For the first time, I was making choices for myself, not for him. I went home and changed the locks on the door we used to share, the click of the new keys in my hand a small, powerful victory. It was such a simple thing, but it felt like drawing a line in the sand. This was my space now, and he wouldn't set foot in it again. I stood there for a moment, breathing in the quiet, feeling the air shift around me. There was no need for shouting, no need for drama. In my calm, I'd found a power that was all mine. I didn't need to shout or scream to make my point. I let my actions speak for me. Each quiet, deliberate step was like a stone in a foundation I was building for myself. Mark had thought he could break me with a single message, but he'd only taught me how to stand taller. I moved through the days with a kind of serene focus, no longer wasting my energy on what-ifs or the past we'd shared. My mind was clear, and every choice I made felt like I was reclaiming a little piece of who I was. In the quiet of my new routine, I found comfort in the small things. The smell of coffee in the morning, the way the sun spilled across the floor, the freedom of being able to breathe in my own space. There was something so healing in the simplicity of it all. I realized I didn't need the noise of confrontation or the drama of a big fight. I just needed this peace, this calm resolve that had been waiting for me all along. He thought he'd left me powerless, but what he didn't see was that in my silence, I held all the power. Every decision I made was a declaration. I wouldn't let his betrayal define me. My calm wasn't weakness. It was the strongest thing I'd ever felt. And as I looked around at the life I was starting to build, I knew that this was only the beginning. I stood in the doorway of what used to be our home, the place that had held our laughter, our quiet mornings, and all the memories that once felt so permanent. My hand rested lightly on the frame, my heart both heavy and light at the same time. There was no sadness in the goodbye I was saying now, only a kind of reverence for the woman I used to be. I took one last look around the room, the space where we'd built a life together and where I was now choosing to let it all go. I picked up my suitcase, my fingers wrapping around the handle with a quiet finality. Every step felt deliberate, each breath a reminder that this was my choice. I walked through the rooms, taking it all in one last time. The worn-out couch where we'd curled up together, the kitchen table where we'd shared so many late-night talks. It was all a part of me once, but it wasn't my future anymore. With each step, I felt the weight of the past start to loosen its grip on my shoulders. I didn't leave a note or a dramatic message behind. I didn't need to. I was done trying to explain myself to someone who'd stopped listening a long time ago. Instead, I sent him a single text. "Don't worry, I'm gone. But you'll never escape what you've lost." My fingers trembled only slightly as I pressed send, and I felt a strange, almost gentle calm wash over me. This was my last word, the only one that mattered. As I walked away from the home we once shared, I felt the cool breeze of the afternoon brush against my skin like a promise. There was a quiet power in the way I held my head high, in the way my feet carried me forward with purpose. I didn't look back, not once, because I knew that looking back wouldn't change anything. This was the end of something that had defined me for far too long. And even though my heart still ached, there was a new strength rising inside me with every step. I thought about the years we'd spent together, the good times, the small joys, the moments that used to feel like enough. And for a brief moment, I let myself feel the sadness of it all, like a farewell to a part of my life that had shaped me. But that sadness didn't own me anymore. It was just a quiet echo, a reminder that I was still standing, still moving forward. I let it wash over me and then fade into the background, a soft murmur of the past. I reached the end of the driveway, pausing for just a second as I took in the world beyond it. The sky was clear, the sun shining down in that warm, familiar way. It felt like a small blessing, a sign that even after all the hurt, there was still light waiting for me. I tightened my grip on the suitcase handle, my heart steady, my breath even. This was my new beginning, and no matter how hard the past tried to hold on, I was ready to let it go. I stepped out into the sunlight, the warmth kissing my skin, and the weight of the past falling away with each breath. The world felt new in a way I hadn't expected, bright, sharp, and alive. My heart was still tender, but I felt a flicker of hope that was stronger than the ache. I didn't know exactly what lay ahead, but for the first time in a long time, that uncertainty didn't scare me. It felt like possibility, like a blank page waiting for me to fill it with something real. I walked to my car, the suitcase bumping lightly against my leg as I moved. It was a small car, nothing fancy, but it felt like freedom. I put my things in the trunk, taking one last deep breath as I closed it. No tears this time, no hesitation. Just the steady, quiet knowing that I was done living in the shadow of someone else's choices. My heart still hurt, but it was beating for me now, not for him. And that was enough. As I slid into the driver's seat and turned the key, I felt a quiet resolve settle over me like a second skin. I wasn't running away. I was leaving with purpose. He had walked away from my life, but I was stepping into something new, something stronger than I'd ever imagined. And as the car pulled away from the house, I didn't look back, because I knew, deep in my bones, that the only direction left for me to go was forward. I moved into a small apartment on the edge of the city, the kind of place that felt like mine from the second I walked through the door. It was bright and open, with sun streaming through the windows and hardwood floors that creaked just enough to feel lived in. I let myself sink into the quiet of it, the fresh start it offered. No ghosts here, no echoes of the life I'd left behind. Just me and the gentle possibility of something new. It was small, but it was enough. More than enough. I spent my days settling into a rhythm that felt like mine alone. I made coffee in the mornings, letting the rich smell fill the room as I watched the city wake up outside. I started taking long walks after work, breathing in the crisp air and the sense of freedom that came with it. There was no one to answer to, no one to tiptoe around. Every choice was mine, and it felt like the first time I'd really let myself live that way. I was done carrying the weight of someone else's dreams. At night, I curled up on the worn-out couch with a blanket and a glass of wine, letting the day settle into my bones. I played music that made me feel alive, let the melodies wash away the last of the doubt in my mind. This was my life now, and it was enough. No more waiting for someone else to decide my worth. No more trying to fix what couldn't be fixed. I was done with that chapter, and I was finally ready to write the next one. I started reconnecting with old friends, the kind who had always seen the best in me, even when I couldn't see it myself. We laughed over dinner and shared stories that reminded me who I really was. They didn't look at me like I was broken or lost. They looked at me like I was whole, like I was exactly where I needed to be. It was in those small moments, the laughter, the warmth, the easy conversations, that I felt the pieces of myself clicking back into place. I also found joy in the work I'd always dreamed of doing, but never had the courage to fully pursue. With Mark, it always felt like there wasn't enough space for my own dreams, like they were something I had to tuck away in the dark. But now, every day was an invitation to create something that was mine alone. I poured my heart into it, let it fill me up in ways I hadn't realized I'd been starving for, and slowly, I saw myself coming back to life. The best part was that I didn't need anyone's permission to be happy anymore. I didn't need to wait for someone to choose me or tell me I was enough. I was learning to choose myself every single day. It wasn't always easy. There were still nights when the loneliness crept in, still moments when I missed the comfort of the life I'd left. But even on those nights, I knew that I was stronger than I'd ever been, and that strength was mine to keep. One evening, I sat alone at my little kitchen table, the soft glow of a single candle flickering beside me. I poured myself a glass of wine and let the silence of the apartment settle around me like a warm blanket. I didn't feel lonely. Not really. I felt free. I raised my glass in a quiet toast to myself, to the woman who had weathered the storm and come out the other side. My heart still ached in places, but there was a steadiness there now that hadn't been before. I thought of all the things I'd survived, the heartbreak, the betrayal, the nights spent doubting my own worth. And in that moment, I felt something shift inside me. I realized that he'd never really broken me. He'd just stripped away everything that wasn't meant for me, leaving me with the truest parts of who I was. I didn't have to be defined by what I'd lost. I could be defined by what I chose to build from here on out. As I took a sip of wine, I let the warmth settle in my chest. I knew this was only the beginning of my new life, A life that was mine to shape, mine to love, mine to protect. He thought he'd broken me. But he was wrong. I was just getting started.